Good Shabbos. This week's portion is Parshas Vayera. And in this Parsha, we have a section which deals with what is actually happening day to day in Israel today. Listening to the news, the media is no longer focusing on the past terrorism of October 7th, but is more concerned, and somewhat rightfully so, of what's going to happen in Gaza and how are the people of Gaza going to survive the attack by Israel that is 100% meant only to uproot the Hamas terrorists, but of course there will be many others who suffer, whether injured or died, displaced. And this portion talks about the story of Sodom and the arguments that Avram has with God. And if you read it carefully, you'll see that the discussion that Avram has with God and the way the Torah deals with it is almost a complete parallel to what's happening in Gaza. Let's start off with what it says about Sodom. God says that he hears the cry of the evil of Sodom, and he comes down to destroy it. And when Lot moved there, it said that the people of Sodom were ra'im v'chatoim la'Hashem ma'od, were evil and sinful to God, very much so. So now God decides he's going to destroy it, but he lets Avram know. He lets outsiders, like we have today, know about what's going to happen in advance. And Avram, standing from the outside, says, how is it possible? Ha'af tispet tzaddik in Russia? Are you going to destroy and kill the righteous with the wicked? Maybe there's 50 righteous people in the city. That's very interesting. He doesn't say, oh, maybe there's one righteous person. Maybe there's two. It's not clear in the Torah whether this is just a number where you need 50 or it's a proportion of the population of Sodom, or it's 50 important people who have to be righteous and therefore could affect the rest of the city. It's very unclear. And possibly we could start looking at commentaries and trying to understand what does it mean. But maybe we should just read the text as it is, and maybe it's telling us that situations are not clear. We don't know exactly what we need. But from the outside, we look at it and we say, how is it possible that there'll be righteous people that will be killed because there are so many wicked people in the city? And God says, no, I won't destroy the city of Sodom if there's 50 people. And not only does he say I won't kill those 50 people, he says, I will carry all of the place because of them. The whole city will be saved if there's just 50 people. So God seems to be saying, yes, if there's 50 people, that's enough. But he says, but there aren't 50 people. There aren't 50 righteous people. And as I read that this morning and listening to the news, I realized that something I missed over all the years is, what about all the innocent children? Do you need 50 righteous people, as I mentioned before, who could therefore influence the city? Or do you need innocent people? It seems that the Torah is not concerned with the innocent people. It's concerned with the righteous people that deserve to be saved in their own right, or that could influence the city. Again, I don't know what the answer is, but the fact that the Torah doesn't talk about all the innocent children seems to be something of a problem. And then, of course, we see Avram negotiating with God, 50, 45, 40, 30, 20, 10. And God says, no, I wouldn't do it if there was even 10 people. And there's something very lacking here. Avram doesn't mention Lot. Avram previously had gone to war and killed many people in order to save his nephew Lot. And then, of course, he also saves other people in the city of Sodom. But here, Avram doesn't say anything about saving Lot, but yet, many sentences later in the Torah, it says that God saved Lot. It says, because Vayizkar lehim es Avram, God remembered Avram, v'yishalach es Lot mitoch afecha, and he sends out Lot from under the storm that was killing the city. I was destroying the city. So it says he saved Lot. You would think that Lot was one of those righteous people. Some commentaries say, oh, there weren't 10, but there were only 8. Who were the 8? It was Lot, his wife, his 2 daughters that left with him, and the 2 daughters that didn't go with him, and his 2 son-in-laws. So that's 8. But now it says that he saved him because he remembered Avram. Is he being saved because he has a pull, that he has an uncle who is a righteous person that God loves? And then you have to ask, was his wife worthy of being saved? She turns around and turns into a pillar of salt. Was that enough to have her die? Were the 2 daughters who were married, were they worthy of being saved? Lot was ready to save them if they would have just left, but they refused to go, and it wasn't even them who refused to go. It was their husbands that laughed at Lot and said, we're not going, and they end up being killed. It's so unclear. It's so difficult to read this story. And then, not only that, but before the story, when the Malachim, the angels, go to save Lot, and that's their mission, and to destroy Sodom, we're told of the story of the men of Sodom who come and try to take these men out and seemingly want to rape them. And then Lot's response is so strange. He says, no, I'm saving them, but take my daughters instead. Is that the actions of a tzaddik, of a righteous person who should be saved? The Torah seems to be telling us this story to say, yes, Avraham, you want to save these people, but as one of the commentaries says, to have Rahmanis, to have mercy on an aksar, on a cruel person, is actually an act of cruelty. If you're allowing a cruel person, or in our case, a terrorist, to survive, what is he or she going to do later on? Who are you victimizing later on? And therefore, is the collateral damage of those righteous people or the innocent children, is it allowable to kill them because of that? Because of the cruelty which might come otherwise? It's very unclear. I want to only pose it as a question, because as I listen to the news and I think about it in different terms. On the one hand, I listen to outsiders who talk about the innocent children. On the other hand, I listen to it as a Jew who knows what's going to happen and what has happened to my brothers and sisters in Israel if we allow them to live. We know the history of what's happened. We know almost the future of what will happen if we don't go in, if Israel doesn't go in and destroy Hamas. And then you look at the destruction and you see the children suffering in Gaza and you say, Hashofet kol haaretz lo yasa mishpat, as Avram said, will a judge of all the earth not do justice? And God seems to be saying yes, but sometimes that's what has to be done. But the lines are not very clear. And I would only suggest that these issues are present throughout history. And even in the Torah, I would argue that we don't have it's not giving us the clear answer. Maybe the answer is that we have to struggle with these issues. But at the end of the day, of course, it's easy for us to sit here on the sidelines and discuss what should be done. As I was listening to the news before, I hear these pundits saying, well, we have to go in and do it with surgical strikes have to be done just to take out the Hamas. And then, of course, they're not answering. Of course, you can't do a surgical strike against a commander who's hiding amongst hundreds of civilians in a hospital and say, well, just take him out, right? And put all of the Israeli soldiers' lives on line to invade a hospital in order to take out one person? Or do you let him live, as Israel has done in the past, and allowed him to come back in the future and do such terrible harm? Do we give up? Didn't even discuss, do we give up the thousands and thousands of terrorists which are in Israeli prisons in order to save the hostages? Which again, are you looking at as an outsider? You're looking at it just from a military point of view, from a national point of view. What about the families of those hostages? What about the human being within all of us which cries out and says, how can we allow someone to be tortured and die in the hands of the Hamas terrorists? I would hope that there would be answers to all of these questions, but I don't know the answers, and I don't know if there's any really good answer. But at the end of the day, we have to make a decision, and somebody has to make that decision. In the case of the Torah, God makes the decision. Avram didn't even argue for his nephew, but God saved his nephew. Did he saved him, as I said before, because he remembered Avram? Or was Lot a tzaddik? Lot was trying to save the guests. We see him as a righteous person, but yet he's giving up his daughters. Things are much more complicated than would seem to be on the surface. And arguments are made very simply by people who are not involved. And yet we have to make decisions. I only would hope that the decisions we make are the best under the circumstances. And I say we as Jews, but those that are in charge of making these decisions, we can only pray that they're divinely inspired to make the right decision. And hopefully, at the end, peace will come, and we will eventually go back to a place where we could live in peace and not have to worry about these terrible events which are occurring to us almost on a daily basis. Good Shabbos.